The holographic screen flickered to life in the center of the Galactic News Network's evening broadcast, and what appeared next would change everything. A tall, slender figure stood in a cramped room with metal walls and harsh white lighting. Her skin was a pale blue-gray color that seemed to shimmer slightly under the artificial glow. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, dark and deep, filled with a sadness that needed no translation. "Please," she said, her voice soft and breaking. The words came slowly, carefully, as if each one cost her something precious. "I am Kelara. I am dying. My children, they have no home. No future." Behind her, four small figures sat huddled together on a thin mattress that looked too small for all of them. They were smaller versions of their mother, with the same blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. The oldest looked to be about 13 years old in human terms. He had his arms wrapped around the three younger ones, holding them close. They all stared at the camera with expressions that mixed fear, confusion, and a desperate kind of hope. "In 30 days, Kelara continued, pressing a three-fingered hand against her chest, "they will be separated. Sent to different worlds. Different stations. They will lose each other. They will lose everything that remains." She paused and a tear rolled down her cheek. It was strange and beautiful, catching the light as it fell. "I beg you, humans. I have watched your history. Your films. Your stories. You take in the abandoned. You love across all differences. Please, I am asking you, adopt my children. Give them a family. A home. End their loneliness. And mine." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only the shocked face of the news anchor staring at the empty space where the hologram had been. Within 1 hour, the video had been viewed 10 million times. Within 3 hours, 50 million. By the end of the day, over 3 billion people across human space had watched the desperate plea of a dying alien mother. Dr. Amy Foster lived alone in a small apartment on the 73rd floor of a residential tower in New Seattle. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, though she only used one. The second bedroom had a door she kept closed. She had not opened that door in 2 years, not since the accident that took her husband Paul and shattered every dream she had carefully built for her future. She was 41 years old. For the past 2 years, she had thrown herself into her work at the Interspecies Research Institute, studying alien biology and physiology. She knew more about the internal organs of a Kryllian than she did about her own neighbors. She could identify 300 alien species by sight and explain their evolutionary adaptations. But she came home every night to silence and empty rooms. That evening, she had heated a frozen meal and sat down to eat while watching the news, the same routine she followed every single day. When Kelara's transmission began, Amy had been lifting her fork to her mouth. The fork never made it. She sat frozen, watching this alien mother beg for help, watching those 4 children cling to each other in that terrible shelter. When it ended, Amy set down her fork. Her food grew cold as she replayed the transmission. Once, twice, 3 times. She could not look away from the children's faces. The oldest boy with his protective grip on his siblings. The 2 middle children, twins perhaps, their hands clasped together. The youngest, barely visible behind the others, peeking out with enormous eyes. Valorians. She recognized the species immediately from her research. Their homeworld, Valoria Prime, had been consumed by its dying star 8 months earlier. The planet's core had destabilized, and they had only 3 days of warning. Evacuation ships had managed to save 30,000 people from a population of 400 million. Those 30,000 were now scattered across dozens of refugee stations throughout the galaxy, trying to survive in environments their bodies were never designed for. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from her colleague and closest friend, Dr. Lisa Wong. The message was short. "Amy, I know that look. Whatever you're thinking, please call me first. Don't do anything crazy." Amy smiled, but it was a sad smile. Lisa knew her too well. Yes, it was probably crazy. It was definitely crazy. She pulled up the Institute's database and began scrolling through the files on Valorian biology and physiology. The list was long and complicated. Valorians required higher atmospheric pressure than Earth standard. Their ideal temperature range was 15 to 20 degrees Celsius colder than what humans preferred. Their protein structures were fundamentally different, meaning they could not eat human food and humans could not eat theirs. They required specific mineral supplements that had to be synthesized. Their children developed in stages that did not match human childhood at all. Any reasonable person would look at that list and understand why cross-species adoption had never been attempted in the entire history of galactic civilization. The biological barriers were simply too great. The cultural differences too vast. The legal complications endless. But Amy kept thinking about that second bedroom down the hall. The one with the door she kept closed. The room that was supposed to be a nursery. She and Paul had painted it together, a soft yellow color that would work for either a boy or a girl. They had picked out furniture. Started collecting books and toys. Made plans and dreams and promises. Then Paul's transport had crashed on his way home from a conference. And the fertility treatments that had already failed 3 times became something she could not bear to try again. The adoption agencies had waiting lists years long. At 41, she had been forced to accept that motherhood was not going to be part of her story. She had accepted it. She had moved on. She had built a life around her work, around being useful in other ways. But now she looked at those 4 Valerian children on her screen, and she thought about the fact that in 30 days they would be torn apart. Sent to different facilities. Different worlds. They would lose not only their mother and their planet and their entire civilization but also each other. The last pieces of family they had left. Amy stood up from her chair. She walked to the window and looked out over the glowing city below. Millions of lights. Millions of people. Most of them had probably seen the transmission. Most of them had probably felt sorry for those children. But feeling sorry and actually doing something were 2 very different things. She picked up her tablet and opened a new message to the Earth Refugee Council. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. This was insane. She had no experience raising children. She had no way to care for alien biology. She did not even speak their language. There were 1,000 reasons why this could not work. But there were 4 reasons why it had to. She began typing. My name is Dr. Amy Foster. I am a xenobiologist with the Interspecies Research Institute. I am writing to formally express my interest in adopting the 4 Valerian children from Kelara's family. I understand the challenges involved, but I believe I can provide them with a safe and loving home. Please contact me to discuss the next steps. She read it over once. Then, before she could change her mind, she pressed send. The message disappeared into the network. Amy stood in her empty apartment, her heart pounding, and waited. The transport shuttle docked at the Mars refugee station with a soft metallic clang that echoed through the passenger compartment. Amy sat in her seat, gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her hands had not stopped shaking since she left Earth 3 hours ago. She had packed a small bag with gifts for the children, though she had no idea if they would even want them. A stuffed animal. Some picture books. Candy that Lisa had assured her was safe for Valerian biology, though Amy had checked the chemical composition 3 times to be certain. The past 2 weeks had been a blur of paperwork, medical examinations, background checks, and interviews. The Earth Refugee Council had been skeptical at first, but Amy's credentials as a xenobiologist had helped. She understood alien physiology. She worked with non-human species every day. And perhaps most importantly, she was one of the only people who had actually volunteered. Final stop, Mars Station 7, the automated voice announced. Please gather your belongings and proceed to the exit in an orderly fashion. Amy stood on legs that felt unsteady. She collected her bag and joined the small group of passengers heading toward the airlock. Most of them were aid workers or government officials. A few gave her curious looks, perhaps wondering what a single woman was doing on a refugee station, but no one asked questions. The station was massive, a sprawling structure that housed over 15,000 refugees from a dozen different species. The air smelled strange, a mixture of recycled oxygen and unfamiliar scents from alien quarters. The corridors were painted a dull gray, and the lighting was harsh and cold. Amy followed the directions on her tablet, making her way through the maze of hallways toward Sector K, where the Valerian refugees were housed. She passed groups of aliens she had only seen in textbooks. Tall, insectoid creatures with clicking mandibles. Small, furry beings that moved in family groups. A pair of floating jellyfish-like entities that drifted past in specialized containment fields. All of them were displaced. All of them were far from home. The visitation room was in the administrative section of Sector K. Amy stopped outside the door, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What was she doing? What made her think she could do this? She was just one person. One human who barely knew how to take care of herself, let alone 4 alien children with needs she could not fully understand. But she thought of that empty apartment. That closed door. That silence that had become her constant companion. She pressed the button to open the door. The room was small and cold, with white walls and a metal table in the center. There were chairs on both sides, and in the chairs across from the door sat Kelara and her 4 children. Amy's breath caught in her throat. Seeing them in person was completely different from seeing them on a screen. Kelara looked even more fragile than she had in the transmission. Her blue-gray skin seemed almost translucent, and Amy could see the outline of bones beneath. She was dying, that much was obvious. The illness was consuming her from within. The children sat close to their mother, pressed against her sides. The oldest boy sat to Kelara's right, and he looked directly at Amy with an expression that was not welcoming. His large dark eyes were filled with suspicion and anger. He was protecting his family, Amy realized. He did not trust this human stranger, and why should he? The two middle children, a boy and a girl who were clearly twins, sat on Kelara's left. They held hands tightly, their eyes wide and frightened. Behind them all, barely visible, was the youngest, a small girl who could not have been more than 6 years old in human terms. She peeked out at Amy and then quickly hid her face against her mother's arm. "Dr. Foster," Kelara said softly. Her voice was weak, but there was emotion in it that made Amy's chest tighten. "You really came." Amy moved forward slowly, not wanting to frighten the children. She set her bag down on the floor and approached the table. "Yes," she said, her own voice barely more than a whisper. "I came. I told you I would." Kelara reached out with one three-fingered hand, and Amy took it without hesitation. The alien woman's skin was cool to the touch, and her grip was weak, but she held on tightly. "I did not believe," Kelara said, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. "I sent that message to hundreds of families. Thousands. I thought perhaps one would answer, but no one did. No one except you." Amy felt her own eyes beginning to burn with tears. "I'm here," she said. "And I want to help. If you'll let me." The oldest boy made a sound, something sharp and angry in his own language. Kelara responded to him in Valerian, her tone gentle but firm. The boy shook his head, his jaw set in a stubborn line. "This is Theron," Kelara said, switching back to English. "He is 14 years old. He is angry with me for this. He thinks I should not trust a human. That you will hurt us or abandon us like so many others have." Amy looked at Theron directly. She did not look away even though his glare was intense. "I understand," she said to him. "You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. Your world is gone. Your father is gone. And now your mother is." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You have every right to be angry. Every right to be scared." Theron's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she had spoken directly to him rather than just to his mother. "These are Mira and Kale," Kelara continued, gesturing to the twins. "They are 10 years old. And this," she reached behind her and gently pulled the youngest child forward, "is Lyra. She is 6. She has not spoken since we left our world. The shock was too much for her." Little Lyra looked at Amy with enormous eyes, then buried her face in her mother's side again. Amy knelt down beside the table so she was at eye level with the children rather than towering over them. "I know this is scary," she said softly. "Everything has changed for you. Everything is strange and frightening. And now there's a human woman saying she wants to take care of you, and you probably think that's the craziest thing you've ever heard." Mira, one of the twins, made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Kale squeezed his sister's hand tighter. "I'm not going to lie to you," Amy continued. "I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been a mother before. I've never raised children, human or otherwise. I'm going to make mistakes. Probably a lot of them." She paused, searching for the right words. "But I promise you this. I will try. I will try with everything I have to give you a home. To keep you together. To keep you safe." Kelara was crying openly now, her tears flowing freely. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for us? We are nothing to you. We are not even your species." Amy thought about that empty apartment. That closed door. That silence. She thought about Paul and the dreams they had built together. She thought about how much she had wanted to be a mother, and how she had convinced herself that door was closed forever. "Because I'm lonely too," Amy said simply. "Because that house I live in is too quiet. Because I know what it's like to lose everything and feel like you're drowning." She looked at each of the children in turn, then back at Kelara. "Maybe we can help each other. Maybe we can figure this out together." Theron was still glaring, but his expression had softened slightly. The twins watched Amy with cautious curiosity. Little Lyra peeked out from behind her mother's arm again, her eyes locked on Amy's face. Kelara squeezed Amy's hand with what little strength she had left. "Then I give them to you," she whispered. "I give you my children. My treasures. My whole heart. Please keep them together. Please love them." Amy squeezed back, tears now streaming down her own face. "I will," she promised. "I swear to you I will." In that cold, sterile visitation room on a refugee station orbiting Mars, two mothers from different worlds made a promise that would change the course of galactic history. But in that moment, neither of them was thinking about history. They were only thinking about 4 children who desperately needed a home, and 1 woman who desperately needed to fill the silence in her heart. The official rejection letter arrived exactly 7 days after Amy's visit to the Mars refugee station. She had been expecting it in a way, but the actual words still hit her like a physical blow. She sat at her kitchen table and read the message 3 times, each word feeling heavier than the last. After careful consideration of your application for cross-species adoption, the Earth Adoption Council has determined that the request must be denied. The biological incompatibilities between human and Valerian physiology make this arrangement not only impractical but dangerous. Human caregivers cannot adequately meet the atmospheric, nutritional and medical needs of Valerian children. Furthermore, the psychological impact of cross-species parenting on both the children and the adoptive parent cannot be adequately predicted or mitigated. We understand your compassionate intentions, but we must prioritize the safety and well-being of all parties involved. This decision is final. Amy set down her tablet and stared at the wall. Final. That word echoed in her mind. She thought of Kelara's face, so full of hope when Amy had promised to help. She thought of little Lyra, who had not spoken since her world died. She thought of Theron's angry, protective glare, and the twins holding hands so tightly. She thought of the countdown. 23 days left before they would be separated forever. No, Amy said aloud to her empty apartment. No, this is not final. She picked up her tablet again and began making calls. The first person she called was Lisa, who answered on the second ring. Amy, I just saw the news. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, Amy said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Help me instead. I need to know exactly what modifications would be required to make my apartment suitable for Valerian children. Temperature, pressure, air composition, everything. Can you pull together a team? There was a long pause. Then Lisa said, You're not giving up. Not even close. Then neither am I. Give me 2 hours. The second call was to her old friend Martin, a structural engineer who specialized in habitat design. He had helped build some of the first human colonies on Mars. Martin, I need you to tell me if it's possible to create pressure-controlled rooms inside a standard apartment building. And I need you to tell me the truth, not what you think I want to hear. Martin was quiet for a moment. I saw that transmission. The Valerian mother. That's what this is about. Yes. The council said no? The council is wrong. Martin laughed, a short bark of sound. All right then. Send me your apartment specs. I'll have preliminary designs by tomorrow morning. The third call was to the Interspecies Research Institute, where she asked to speak with the director. Sir, I need to request a leave of absence. I also need access to the Institute's resources for a private project. Dr. Foster, I'm aware of your adoption attempt. I'm very sorry it didn't work out. It's going to work out, Amy said firmly. But I need help. I need scientists who understand Valerian biology. I need engineers. I need people who believe that impossible just means nobody's done it yet. The director was silent for a long time. Then he said, Come to my office tomorrow at 9. Bring your plans. Amy spent the entire night working. She compiled research papers on Valerian physiology. She sketched rough designs for room modifications. She calculated costs and timelines. She made lists of everything that would need to change, every problem that would need solving. The list was long. Very long. But every single item on that list was solvable. Difficult, yes. Expensive, absolutely. But not impossible. By morning she had the foundation of a plan. By that afternoon she had a team. Lisa brought 3 other xenobiologists from the institute. Martin brought 2 engineers and an architect. A nutritionist who specialized in alien dietary needs volunteered her services. A doctor who had treated Valerian refugees on Mars offered to consult on medical requirements. They all gathered in Amy's small apartment, looking at the space with professional eyes, calculating what could be done. The main issue is atmospheric pressure, Lisa explained, pointing at her tablet's display. Valorians need about 1.3 times Earth standard pressure. We can't change the entire apartment, but we could seal off the 2 bedrooms and create pressure-controlled environments there. Temperature is easier, Martin added. Just need to install independent climate control. We can keep their rooms at 12 degrees Celsius while the common areas stay at normal temperature. They'll need to wear thermal suits when they're in the rest of the apartment, but that's manageable. Nutrition is going to be the biggest ongoing challenge, the nutritionist said. Valerian food has to be specially synthesized. But there's a company on Europa that produces alien nutritional supplements. I've already contacted them. They can provide everything needed for 4 children, delivered monthly. Amy listened to them all, her heart swelling with gratitude. These people barely knew her, and they were offering their time, their expertise, their belief that this could work. There's one problem, the architect said quietly. Cost. The modifications you're talking about, the equipment, the ongoing nutritional supplies. We're looking at about 400,000 credits. Minimum. The room fell silent. Amy's savings amounted to maybe 30,000 credits. She could take loans, but even then the banks would never approve enough for this. Then we ask for help, Lisa said suddenly. We tell the story. Let people know what you're trying to do. If they want to help, they can. That evening, Lisa set up a crowdfunding page. She wrote the story of Kelara and her 4 children. She explained Amy's plan and why the adoption council was wrong. She included the engineering designs, the biological research, everything that proved this was possible. At the bottom, she put a simple message: help us prove that family doesn't require the same species. Help us keep 4 children together. The page went live at 8 in the evening. By midnight, it had raised 50,000 credits. By morning, 200,000. People from across Earth and Mars and the orbital stations contributed. 10 credits, 100 credits, whatever they could spare. Messages poured in with the donations. My grandmother was adopted across cultural lines. This is the same thing, just bigger. I lost my family in the colony collapse on Titan. I know what those children are facing. Here's what I can give. Humanity is supposed to be better than this. Prove it. Within 3 days, the campaign had raised over 600,000 credits. More than enough for the modifications and years of supplies. Amy stared at the numbers on her screen and cried. She had not been alone in this fight. Thousands of humans had stood up and said, yes, this matters, this is worth doing. The modifications began immediately. Workers tore out walls and installed new ones. Engineers fitted the bedrooms with pressure seals and independent life support systems. The temperature controls went in. Special filters for the air. Medical monitoring equipment in case of emergencies. Amy's quiet apartment became a construction site, loud and chaotic and full of hope. News of the project spread beyond Earth. Within a week, observers from the Galactic Council requested permission to visit and evaluate the modifications. They arrived with skeptical expressions and clipboards full of regulations. A tall, insectoid alien named Council Member Zex led the inspection team. His compound eyes took in every detail of Amy's apartment with obvious doubt. This is highly irregular, he said through his translator device. Cross-species adoption has never been approved by the Galactic Council. There are protocols. Standards. Amy stood in her torn-apart living room, surrounded by tools and half-finished construction, and looked the council member directly in his many eyes. Your protocols say it's impossible, she said calmly. But humans have a different relationship with the word impossible. We don't accept it as an ending. We see it as a starting point. The biological barriers can be overcome. We've already overcome them. Look around you. This apartment will maintain Valerian atmospheric conditions in the bedrooms while allowing the children to spend time in Earth-normal conditions in the common areas. They'll have the nutrition they need, the medical monitoring they need, the temperature regulation they need. Zex there clicked his mandibles in what might have been disapproval. And what about the psychological needs? The cultural needs? You are not Valerian. You cannot teach them their own heritage. No, Amy agreed. But I can help them remember it, honor it, and I can teach them that family isn't about being the same. It's about choosing to love each other anyway. She took a step closer to the council member. You came here expecting this to fail. You came here expecting me to give up. But I'm not going to. Those children have 16 days left before they're separated forever. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen. The council member was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, we will observe. And we will report our findings to the Galactic Council. That's all I ask, Amy said. As the observers left, Martin came up beside Amy. Think you convinced them? Amy looked around at her destroyed apartment, at the equipment being installed, at the proof that humans could adapt to anything when it mattered. I don't know, she said honestly. But we're not stopping either way. The courtroom on Mars Station 7 was filled to capacity. Reporters from dozens of news networks lined the back wall, their cameras recording everything. Representatives from the Galactic Council sat in the observer section, their faces unreadable. Human officials from Earth sat beside alien refugees from a dozen different species. Everyone wanted to witness what was about to happen, something that had never occurred in the entire history of galactic civilization. Amy sat at the front table, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. She wore a simple blue dress, the nicest thing she owned. Beside her sat the 4 Valerian children, scrubbed clean and dressed in clothes that Amy had spent 3 days figuring out how to make fit their different body structure. Theron sat closest to Amy, his expression carefully neutral. The twins Mira and Kale held hands as always. Little Lyra sat on Amy's other side, and for the first time since they had met, the small girl was holding Amy's hand. The judge, a human woman named Patricia Stone, looked down at them from her bench. She had presided over thousands of adoption cases in her career, but never anything like this. "We are gathered here today," she began, her voice carrying through the silent room, "to determine the custody and care of 4 Valerian minor children. This is unprecedented in every possible way. The legal, biological, and social implications of this decision will echo far beyond this courtroom." Amy felt Lyra's small 3-fingered hand squeeze hers tighter. She squeezed back gently, reassuringly. "However," Judge Stone continued, "the law is clear. Our responsibility is not to what is convenient or traditional. Our responsibility is to what is best for these children." She looked directly at Amy. "Dr. Foster, please stand." Amy stood, her legs steady despite her racing heart. "I have reviewed your application. I have examined the modifications made to your home. I have consulted with experts in xenobiology, engineering, psychology, and interspecies relations. I have reviewed the testimonies of the hundreds of people who have supported this effort." Judge Stone paused, and for a moment, Amy thought she saw the hint of a smile on the woman's stern face. "I have also reviewed the Galactic Council's concerns. And I have reached a decision." The room seemed to hold its breath. Amy could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "It is the judgment of this court that Dr. Amy Foster is fit and capable of providing care for these 4 children. Furthermore, it is clear that no other suitable placement has been found that would allow the children to remain together. Therefore, I am granting full legal custody of Theron, Mira, Kale, and Lyra to Dr. Amy Foster, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. People in the gallery began to applaud. Amy felt her knees go weak and she grabbed the table for support. She had done it. They had actually done it. Judge Stone banged her gavel. "Order. We're not finished." The room quieted again. "Dr. Foster, this court will be monitoring this placement closely. You will submit monthly reports on the children's health and well-being. You will maintain regular contact with Valerian cultural advisors. And if at any time this arrangement proves harmful to these children, custody will be re-evaluated. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Amy said, her voice thick with emotion. "I understand completely." "Then congratulations. You are now officially a mother." Amy turned to the children. Theron was staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. The twins were crying, holding on to each other. And little Lyra looked up at Amy with those enormous dark eyes and whispered, in barely audible English, "Mama?" It was the first word she had spoken in 9 months. Amy dropped to her knees and pulled all 4 children into her arms, not caring that their body temperature was different from hers, not caring that their bodies were shaped wrong for a human embrace. They were hers now. Her children. Her family. Across the station in the medical wing, Kelara watched the ceremony on a screen beside her hospital bed. She was too weak to attend in person, the illness having consumed most of her strength. But she saw the judge's declaration. She saw Amy embrace her children. And she wept tears of joy and relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room. "Thank you." The transport to Earth took 6 hours. The children had never been to a planet before, having been born on Valoria Prime and living in space stations since its destruction. They pressed against the windows of the shuttle, staring in wonder at the blue and green sphere growing larger below them. "It's so big," Mira breathed. "And so blue," Kale added. "Our world was more red and orange." "Will it hurt us?" Lyra asked quietly, still holding Amy's hand. "No, sweetheart," Amy assured her. "We'll be very careful. Your rooms are ready for you. Everything you need is there." Theron said nothing, but Amy noticed he was gripping the armrest of his seat very tightly. The shuttle landed in New Seattle just after sunset. A crowd had gathered at the spaceport holding signs and banners. "Welcome home," they read. "Congratulations, Amy. One family, many species." Amy had not expected this. She had thought they would slip quietly into the city, begin their new life without fanfare. But as she and the children walked through the terminal, people applauded. Some waved. Others held up their phones to take pictures. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. A car was waiting to take them to the apartment. The children climbed in carefully and used to vehicles that moved on the ground. Everything was new and strange to them. The buildings, the air that smelled like plants and rain, the sounds of a living city. When they arrived at the apartment building, more surprises waited. Amy's neighbors had hung a banner across the hallway. "Welcome to the family," it proclaimed. Mrs. Chin from apartment 405 had left a basket of fruit outside the door, with a note explaining which ones were safe for Valerian digestion and which were just for Amy. Mr. Peterson from down the hall had left a stack of children's books, both human and Valerian, that he had somehow managed to obtain. Amy unlocked the door and led the children inside. The construction was complete. The apartment looked nothing like it had before. The 2 bedrooms on the left side of the apartment now had special sealed doors. Inside, the pressure and temperature were set to Valerian specifications. The beds were made with special fabrics that would not irritate their sensitive skin. The walls were painted in soft colors that Valerian eyes found soothing. "This is your home now," Amy said softly, watching the children explore. "These 2 bedrooms are yours. You can arrange them however you like. The bathroom has been modified for you. The kitchen has your food storage." Mira and Kale immediately claimed 1 bedroom together, unwilling to be separated even to sleep. Theron took the smaller room, his expression still guarded. Lyra stood in the middle of the living room looking lost. "Where do I sleep?" she asked in her tiny voice. "With your sister and brother if you'd like," Amy said. "Or I can set up a bed in my room if you want to be close to me." Lyra thought about this very seriously. Then she said, "With you. Please." Amy felt her heart crack open a little wider. "Of course, sweetheart. Of course." The first few days were chaos. The children struggled with Earth's gravity, which was slightly heavier than Valoria Prime had been. They moved slowly, carefully until their bodies adjusted. They wore special thermal suits when they came out of their pressure-controlled rooms, making them look like tiny astronauts wandering through the apartment. The neighbors brought food almost every day. Most of it was for Amy, since the children needed their specially synthesized Valerian meals, but the gesture mattered. Mrs. Chin came by to teach Amy how to cook a simple stir-fry. Mr. Peterson's daughter, who was a teacher, offered to tutor the children in English. A family from the 4th floor invited them all to a barbecue in the building's common area. Slowly, carefully, the children began to relax. Mira started asking questions about everything. What were those green things in the park? Why did human children play so differently? How did rain work? Kale discovered a love for Earth music and spent hours listening to everything Amy could find for him. Lyra followed Amy everywhere, her small hand always reaching for her new mother's. Only Theron remained distant. He was polite but cold. He did his assigned schoolwork without complaint but never volunteered anything extra. He watched Amy with those suspicious eyes, waiting for her to fail, to give up, to prove that she was not really going to stay. 2 weeks after the adoption, Amy received a message from the medical station on Mars. Kelara's condition had worsened. The doctors said she had perhaps 3 or 4 days left. They asked if Amy would bring the children to say goodbye. But Kelara had other ideas. "No," she said weakly when the doctors told her the plan. "I want to come to them. I want to see their home. I want to die knowing what their life will be." The doctors protested. The transport would be too much for her failing body. But Kelara insisted, and in the end they arranged for a medical shuttle with full life support. She arrived on a gray Thursday morning. The children ran to her as she was carried into the apartment on an anti-gravity stretcher. She looked so small and frail, barely there at all. But her eyes were bright as she looked around Amy's apartment, taking in the modifications, the children's artwork already appearing on the walls, the signs of a life being built. "Show me everything," she whispered. The children gave her a tour, chattering excitedly about their beds and their food and the park Amy had taken them to. Kelara smiled and nodded, asking questions, praising them. Amy stayed back, giving them space until Kelara called her over. "Sit with me," the dying woman said. Amy sat beside the stretcher. Kelara reached out and took her hand with that same weak grip from their first meeting. "They are happy," Kelara said. "I can see it. They are adjusting. They are healing." "We're figuring it out together," Amy said. "Some days are harder than others. But we're getting there." "Even Theron?" Amy glanced at the oldest boy, who was showing his mother a drawing he had made. "He's struggling the most. He doesn't trust this yet. Doesn't trust me." Kelara nodded slowly. "He loved his father very much. He watched him die when our world collapsed. He thinks if he loves again he will lose again." I understand, Amy said quietly. I felt that way too. Kelara stayed for 3 days. She slept in the living room, surrounded by her children and their new mother. She told them stories about Valoria Prime, about their father, about their ancestors. She sang them songs in their language that Amy recorded so the children would never forget. And on the third night, as her children slept in their beds and Amy sat beside her in the dark, Kelara took her last breath. She died peacefully. She died knowing her children were safe. She died knowing they would not be alone. At the funeral, held in a small ceremony at the Valerian Refugee Center, Theron finally broke. He stood beside his mother's body and sobbed, great heaving cries that shook his thin frame. And when Amy knelt beside him and wrapped her arms around him, he did not pull away. He clung to her and cried like the child he still was, letting out all the grief he had been holding inside. I miss her, he choked out. I miss them both so much. I know, Amy whispered, holding him tight. I know, sweetheart. I know. And in that moment, Theron finally believed. This human woman was not going to leave. She was not going to give up. She was going to stay. They were going to be okay. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous, a vast circular room with seats rising in tiers all around. Representatives from 200 different species sat in those seats, their attention focused on the platform at the center where Amy Foster stood with her 4 children beside her. It had been 3 years since the adoption, 3 years since Kelara's death, 3 years since that first impossible step into the unknown. Amy barely recognized her children anymore. They had grown so much. Theron was 17 now, tall and confident, no longer the angry protective boy who had glared at her in that first meeting. He stood at a podium to her left, preparing to address the council in both English and Valerian. Mira and Kale were 13, no longer frightened twins clinging to each other but bold young people with their own interests and dreams. Mira wanted to be a marine biologist, fascinated by Earth's oceans that Valoria Prime had never possessed. Kale had discovered a gift for music and spent hours composing pieces that blended human and Valerian instruments in ways no one had heard before. And Lyra. Sweet little Lyra who had not spoken for 9 months. She was 9 years old now and never stopped talking. She chattered constantly about her friends at school, about the books she was reading, about the plants she was growing in the apartment's small garden. She stood beside Amy now, holding her hand just as she had in that courtroom 3 years ago. Members of the Galactic Council, Theron began, his voice steady and clear. My name is Theron, son of Kelara and Vex of Valoria Prime. 3 years ago, my mother died knowing her children were safe. She died knowing we had a home. She died knowing we would not be separated and scattered across the galaxy like so many other refugee children. The council chamber was silent. Every being present was listening. This happened because one human woman refused to accept the word impossible, Theron continued. Dr. Amy Foster saw 4 alien children who needed help, and she did not ask if it was easy. She did not ask if it was convenient. She asked only if it was right. And then she did it. Amy felt Lyra squeeze her hand. She squeezed back, her eyes fixed on Theron as he spoke with the confidence and passion of someone who had found his purpose. In the 3 years since our adoption, 847 other cross-species adoptions have been completed in human space, Theron said. Krillian children living with human families. Delarian orphans finding homes on Earth colonies. Refugees from a dozen species who were facing separation and loneliness now have families who love them. He paused, his dark eyes sweeping across the assembled council members. This happened because humans showed us that family is not about biology. It is about choice. It is about commitment. It is about refusing to let anyone suffer alone when you have the power to help. Mira stepped forward to the podium next. She was smaller than her brother but no less confident. I want to tell you about my school, she said. I attend a human school on Earth. When I first arrived, I was terrified. I looked different. I sounded different. I needed special equipment just to breathe the same air as my classmates. I thought they would hate me or fear me. She smiled and it transformed her face. Instead, they welcomed me. They asked questions about my homeworld. They learned words in my language. They made sure I was included in everything. One boy named Andrew spent 2 months learning Valerian so he could talk to me in my own language. A girl named Sarah started a club at school to learn about refugee cultures. Myra's voice grew stronger. Humans did not see me as an alien. They saw me as a person. A friend. A classmate. That is what humans do. Kale spoke next, his voice softer than his siblings but no less powerful. I was afraid of everything when I came to Earth, he admitted. Afraid of the gravity. Afraid of the food. Afraid of making mistakes. afraid that I would never fit in. He looked at Amy and his expression was full of love. But Amy never let me hide in that fear. She pushed me to try new things, to make friends, to explore. When I discovered I loved music, she found me a teacher. When I wanted to learn human instruments, she bought me a keyboard even though it was expensive. She treated me exactly the way a mother should treat her son. With love, with patience, with belief that I could do anything I set my mind to. Finally, little Lyra stepped up to the podium. Someone had placed a step stool there so she could reach the microphone. She looked tiny standing there, but her voice rang out clear and strong. My mama says that love is not about being the same, she said in her high, sweet voice. Love is about choosing each other every single day. She chooses us every day. She learns our language. She celebrates our holidays. She tells us stories about our birth parents so we never forget where we came from. Lyra's eyes sparkled. And we choose her too. We call her Mama because that is what she is. Not because she is Valerian, but because she loves us and we love her. That is what makes a family. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives were nodding in agreement. Others were talking urgently with their neighbors. Council member Zexthar, the insectoid who had inspected Amy's apartment 3 years ago, rose from his seat. Dr. Foster, he said, his translator device rendering his clicking speech into standard English. I will admit I did not believe this would work. I came to your home 3 years ago expecting to document a failure. I expected those children to be miserable, malnourished, poorly adjusted. He paused. I was wrong. Completely wrong. What you have accomplished is remarkable. It's not just me, Amy said, speaking for the first time. It's thousands of humans who donated money to modify my home. It's neighbors who brought food and friendship. It's teachers who learned new languages. It's doctors who studied alien medicine. It's an entire civilization that decided these children mattered. She looked around the chamber. That is what I came here to tell you today. Humans are not special because we are strong or smart or advanced. We are special because we refuse to accept that anyone should face suffering alone when we have the ability to help. Another council member stood, a floating jellyfish-like being from the Aquarius sector. What you are describing is a complete restructuring of how we handle refugee children. The logistics alone are complicated, Amy finished. Yes, I know. Everything worth doing is complicated. But 3 years ago you told me that cross-species adoption was impossible. You told me the biological barriers were too great. You told me it would never work. She gestured to her 4 children standing beside her. And yet here we are. The council deliberated for 2 hours. Amy and the children waited in an antechamber, sitting together on a bench. Theron reviewed his notes. Mira and Kale played a game on their tablets. Lyra leaned against Amy's side, drowsy from the excitement. Do you think they'll approve it? Theron asked quietly. I don't know, Amy admitted. But we told them the truth. We showed them it can work. The rest is up to them. Finally, a messenger arrived to summon them back to the chamber. Amy's heart pounded as they walked back onto the central platform. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species Amy did not recognize, raised one appendage for silence. The Galactic Council has reached a decision, the speaker announced. After reviewing the evidence presented and consulting with experts across multiple fields, we hereby officially recognize cross-species adoption as a valid and legal form of family formation. Furthermore, we are establishing what will be known as the Foster Protocol, a set of guidelines and support systems to help families navigate the challenges of cross-species parenting. The chamber erupted in applause. Amy felt her knees go weak with relief. They had done it. They had actually changed galactic law. However, the speaker continued and the room quieted again. This decision comes with a challenge to all member species. Humanity has shown us what is possible when compassion overcomes inconvenience. We call upon every civilization in this council to examine their own practices regarding refugee children and orphans. Can you do what the humans have done? Can you open your homes and hearts to those who are different from you? Amy felt tears streaming down her face. Lyra hugged her tightly. Theron put his hand on her shoulder. Mira and Kale were grinning from ear to ear. They left the council chamber to find hundreds of messages waiting on Amy's tablet. News organizations requesting interviews. Families asking for advice on starting their own cross-species adoptions. Government officials wanting to discuss implementation of the Foster Protocol. But one message caught Amy's attention above all the others. It was a video transmission from a small, furry alien woman with 4 arms and desperate eyes. Behind her, 3 small children huddled together in what looked like another refugee shelter. Please, the woman said in halting English. I am dying. My children have nowhere to go. I saw what you did. I saw that humans help. Please, can someone help my babies too? Amy looked at the message for a long moment. Then she opened her contacts and began scrolling through the list. Over the past 3 years, she had met hundreds of families who had been inspired by her story. Families who had completed their own cross-species adoptions. Families who had proven that love really could transcend biology. She found the name she was looking for and started composing a message. Hi Beth, I just received a message from a Talarian mother who needs help. I remember you said you were thinking about adopting again. Are you still interested? The reply came back within minutes. Send me the details. Let's talk. Amy smiled and showed the message to her children. Someone else needs help, she said. Theron nodded. Then we help them. That's what we do now. That's what humans do, Mira added. That's what families do, Kale said. Lyra looked up at Amy with those enormous dark eyes that had once been so full of fear and were now full of hope. We're going to save them, right, Mama? Just like you saved us. Amy pulled her daughter close and kissed the top of her head. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to save them. Because nobody should have to face loneliness alone. Outside the council chamber, a new day was dawning for the galaxy. A day where family was defined not by species or biology, but by choice and love and the stubborn human refusal to accept that anything worth doing was impossible. 847 families had already been formed. Thousands more would follow. And it had all started with one lonely woman who saw 4 frightened children and decided that impossible was just another word for not yet. Amy Foster had come to the Galactic Council to share her story. She left knowing that her story had become the galaxy's story. And somewhere out there, another desperate parent was waiting for help. Another lonely human was ready to open their heart. Another family was about to be born. The ripple effect had only just begun.